This is Energized, a podcast about simple ways you can improve your energy. I'm Dina, a naturopath, personal trainer and wellness coach with 14 years experience working with a wide range of clients to help improve their health, fitness and overall energy. Hello and welcome to this week's Energized podcast. I'm super excited because this week I am interviewing my very first guest. So up until now, my podcast has been solo. If this is the first time you're tuning in, you can jump back and listen to all those previous episodes. But from this week onwards, I will be having some guests, possibly regularly. We will just see how we go. But this week I have Ange Sinclair on as my very first guest because she is an absolute gut guru. Hey, Ange, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Dina, for having me. I'm honoured to be your first guest.
Awesome. So let's get straight into it. We are going to talk today all about poo. So my first question is, why are you so interested in poo?
For lots of reasons. That's a really good question to start the conversation. So for me, a couple of things. I have a history of chronic constipation, so that's the first thing.
Yeah.
So the second thing is bowel cancer is one of the fastest growing conditions in Australia right now, and in the Western world, actually. So I think it's often underlooked for people. I think the third thing is that poo can tell us a lot of information about our health and what's happening for us. You know, I think that's my biggest interest, and I think people are so squeamish about it, and I'd like to say anal about it, no pun intended. And I think that they could do a lot more for themselves if they just looked at their poo regularly.
Yes, amazing. I love it. So yes, it is a topic that I haven't discussed yet on my podcast. I have touched on digestive health, and we know as naturopaths how important digestion is for everything. So let's talk poo. What is it that makes a good poo?
So to start with, I think let's step back one step and talk about what poo is. So poo is 75% water. It's live and dead bacteria that's coming out. It's undigested food that doesn't get broken down by our gut bacteria, or we don't digest it. Cholesterol, it's some proteins, it's medications that we have taken. So that all contains poo. And there's about 7 things that we should be focused on that make a good poo. So how often we poo, the colour of it, whether it sinks or floats, whether it smells, whether there's a big cleanup after, whether you notice food, and how long it should take. So they're all really important aspects of what a good poo should be. So we could touch on 1 or 2 of those.
Yeah, awesome. So let's actually start with how often, because I think that we both know as naturopaths seeing clients that sometimes people think that they are pooing at a normal rate when the reality is what? How often should we be pooing?
So for me, ideally, in the perfect world, it would be food in, food out. That would be ideal. So 3 times a day. If you're having 3 really good sized meals a day, you should be going after each of them. In reality, in clinic, those people are unicorns. So I don't see them very often, but I do see people who are regularly doing 2 well-formed poos every day, and that they're feeling finished when they go. And that's an important factor. You know, so for me, it's at least 1 good bowel movement a day. It should be fully formed. It should be easy to pass, and you should feel complete. And I laugh because there's actually a term when you have a really good poo that's really satisfying. It hits all your nerve endings, and it's called puforia. It's like you get a little natural high from it. So I think that's really important for people to understand that we should be feeling like that every time we have a bowel movement.
Yeah, right. So if someone is having a bowel movement, if they are a unicorn and they're managing to go 3 times a day, you talked about making sure that it is well formed. Can we just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so a well-formed bowel should be, a well-formed poo actually should be, looks like a smiling banana. You know, it should be in one solid piece. It should be really easy to pass. It should be really soft. Well, soft enough to pass that you're not straining or having to push. that it's easy for it to come out. So that's the majority of the things that I would say people should be looking for. And you shouldn't have to sit waiting for 15 or 20 minutes. You shouldn't be able to read your book or take your phone into the bathroom. When you get that urge, you should be able to sit on the toilet, poo comes out, you're up and you're off to enjoy the rest of your day. And I see people, and I hear people often talk about it to me, where people are going in there and spending time sitting for a long period of time. This increases your risk of hemorrhoids and all of that sort of stuff. So you don't want to be sitting on the toilet for that amount of time. You want to go in, you want to do your business and get on with your day.
Awesome. So that means no iPhones in the bathroom, right?
No iPhones. Although I do know there's apps now you can communicate with other people all over the world while you're in the toilet waiting to do a poo. So that seems a bit interesting for me.
Yeah, that's hilarious actually. However, it's, naturopathically speaking, that's not what we want to be doing, right?
No.
Let's talk. So you did mention, it's, and we know, I guess, so many people are really squeamish around poo. Do you think it's got to do with the smell? And let's talk a little bit about smells.
Well, I think it does. But look, I look at children, and children think poo's funny. They think anything to do with poo and farts is funny. And so I think in my practice, I actually do really try to make it a humorous subject, because people are so uptight about bowel movements. When I ask somebody, so how do you poo? Oh, yeah, good.
Yeah.
Let's move on. So it takes a lot of teasing out to get people to talk about it. And for me, honestly, knowing how you can poo could absolutely save your life.
Yeah.
If you're not looking back into the toilet bowl, you are missing out on seeing if your health is really great. And so my message is to everybody, look back, because it really could save your life.
Yes.
And so when it comes in terms of smell, poo should smell, but it should be a really natural smell. It shouldn't be offensive in any way.
Right.
So if you're finding your stool is offensive over and over again, you probably need to get that checked out, because poo shouldn't smell offensive.
Yeah.
I mean, it might on the night you have a curry or something that you don't usually eat.
Or lots of garlic.
Yeah, lots of garlic. But generally, our body adapts to that if it's something we're used to.
Yeah.
For people who are slightly constipated, their poo might smell more because it's staying in there longer and releasing more toxins and stuff like that. But on the whole, poo should be a really natural smelling. If you've got to get out one of those, I don't even know what they're called anymore because it's been years since I've used them, those sprays to spray around in the toilet, in the bathroom when you're in there, that's not a good sign, because that really shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, right. Okay, interesting. I definitely think that you have opened up the eyes of some of our listeners today when it comes to poo. So because this podcast is all about energy, how does our poo affect our energy levels?
Well, sort of in a slightly side angle manner, and I guess it comes back to the food we eat. So our gut bacteria, when we eat food, it turns food into B vitamins. And B vitamins are what gives us the energy that we produce, pretty much. And so when we are eating the right foods, we're going to, the bacteria is going to be metabolizing those foods into those B vitamins to help us, which in turn gives us really healthy poos. So if you're feeling like, really sluggish, or your poo's not working, I think that's a place to look. Come back towards your diet. And diet is a really big indicator for most people on how you poo. You only have to look when we go away on holidays or something. If you're not eating the same foods you would normally eat, you get constipated. Air travel, we get constipated. Changing to different locations where we're out of our sync and out of our routine, that will give us constipation. So there's all those factors to think about, why we're not pooing properly.
Yes, right. So it's the food we eat, and it's more than that as well, right? Obviously, we talk a lot on this podcast about exercise and making sure that you are doing as much as you can for your health, especially increasing fiber to keep you regular and keep your poos regular. And now we know what a good poo looks like and how often we should be having those. And now obviously how it affects our energy levels. So what would you say your number one tip is for someone who's listened to this episode and discovered that their poo probably isn't what it should be? They're not quite a unicorn. What would you say? Number one tip.
So before we do that, can I just talk about some red flags for poos?
Yes.
Because I think this is really important. And if anybody takes anything away from this, it should be these red flags. So if you're having one of these or several of them, you should go and visit your doctor. So unexplained anemia. So you are, especially in men and especially in postmenopausal women. So that's a really big one for me. Changes in our bowel habits. So if you're a 3 times a day person, you go to the bathroom 3 times a day, and then all of a sudden you're going once every other day, that's a red flag for me. If you've gone from being a normal poo, so like that smiling banana we talked about, easy to pass, to passing these little tiny pellet poos, or very loose stools, I would say to you that's a red flag for me. If you start to get abdominal pain that you can't really pick where that's come from, nauseousness, bloating or vomiting that are new for you and that are out of the ordinary, they would need to be investigated. Rectal pain or bleeding that you haven't had, or if you're sitting on the toilet and you're trying to go and you're getting pain, that's also something that should be investigated. And the last one for me is if you have sudden weight loss or you lose your appetite. I think they're really important. So all those are red flags to start with for me. And so the number one tip for me when it comes to poo for people is, 1, to look back at the poo, 2, to make sure you really are increasing your dietary fibre. And it's pitiful how much fibre we eat in Australia. And this is a terrible stat. In 2017-18, 7.5% of Australian adults ate the recommended vegetable intake.
Yeah, it's shocking, isn't it?
It's appalling.
Yeah.
And so that also increases our rate of colon cancer, and I think it's a simple thing to do. And I know people get overwhelmed with adding fibre and what to do, but the trick is just to start really small. Just do one extra thing. Water is really important too, because water helps our body on so many levels, as you would probably have already talked about. But for our poo, it helps it brings that water into the bowel area and helps the poo move through our system, helps it stay soft. When we're not drinking enough water, it's really making that poo hard, making it much more harder to get out. And because we have that bacteria I talked about before in our stomach, we need water to, that mucus in our stomach has this, it gets eaten by the bacteria, and that's driven by water. So if we're not having enough water, that affects our digestive system the whole way down, including our poo. So they're really important aspects of things that we could do at home. Just add another. If you're having a coffee, have a glass of water at the same time. If you're having a couple of wines, have a glass of water, because they all make a difference to how we poo. And people don't think about that often enough. Like I see people who are constipated, and you say, are you drinking your 1.5 to 2 liters of water? And they go, oh no, I only have 1 or 2 glasses. That will make a huge difference.
Yeah.
So I think that's important.
Yeah, there's some really great tips there. I want to just add as well, actually, that often, people might be constipated and not actually realize that they are, because they might be passing a little bit of poo, and that can still be an indication, especially if they're not drinking enough water, that they are still suffering from constipation. So I think that all of your tips there, definitely more than one, which is amazing. Hopefully our listeners have learnt something today about their poo. Where can people find you? So where do you hang out social media wise? How can people get in touch with you?
So I'm mostly on Instagram and Facebook, and I have a Facebook group. So you can find me there. I'm the Digestive Detective on any platform. And I'll just share one thing with you, Dina. I listened to a gastroenterologist in America. She was talking about how big a bowel movement should be. And she suggested it should be from your elbow to your wrist long as a fully formed stool. I don't know many people having bowel movements like that, but that's what she suggested. So it's an interesting thought to leave you with.
Yeah, that is a very interesting thought. Thank you so much. There were lots and lots of interesting things today. I really appreciate you coming on, especially as my first guest. I will add all of your details to the show notes of this episode. And yeah, a massive thanks, Ange.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me. I'm honored again to be your first guest.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.